Reading from the book of Acts, chapter 16, verses 16 through 40. I will be reading from the First Nations version. Hear these words. As they were on their way to where we gathered for prayer, an enslaved girl who had an evil snake spirit met us. She brought her owners much gain by fortune-telling. She began to follow after a small man and shout out loud, "These men who serve the one above us all are showing us the way to be set free and made whole." She did this for many days, and by so doing, she greatly troubled small man, who finally turned and spoke to the evil spirit, "As one who represents Creator sets free, the chosen one, I tell you now to come out of this woman." Right away, the spirit left her. When her owners saw that the hope of their gain was gone, they took hold of small man and woodsman and dragged them to the village rulers at the trading post. They brought them before the village council and said, "These men are from the tribes of wrestles with Creator. They are bringing trouble to our village by trying to force their tribal customs on us. Since we are the people of iron, we are not permitted to accept or follow these customs." The people who had gathered there also began to speak against them. So the village council stripped their clothes off them and gave orders for them to be beaten with sticks. When they finished beating them, they threw them into prison and told the headman of the prison to lock them up. So he followed his instructions, put them deep into the prison, and locked their feet into iron bindings. In the middle of the night, small man and woodsman were sending up prayers and singing sacred songs to the Great Spirit. And the other prisoners were listening. When suddenly the earth began to shake violently, and the stones holding the prison up began to tremble. Right then, the prison doors were opened, and everyone's iron bindings fell off. When the headman of the prison woke up and saw all the prison doors standing open, he took his long knife and was going to kill himself, for he thought all the prisoners had escaped. But small man shouted out to him, "Do not harm yourself. We are all here." The headman of the prison asked for a torch, and trembling with fear, he rushed inside and fell down before small man and woodsman. He then took them outside and said, "What must I do to be set free and made whole?" "Put your trust in Creator sets free, our honored chief," they said to him. "He will make you whole and set you and all your family free to follow him." Then they told Creator's good story to him and all his family. It was still late in the night, but the headman took small man and woodsman and washed their wounds. Then right away, the headman and his family all participated in the purification ceremony. He then invited them into his home and fed them. His heart was glad because he and all his family had put their trust in the Great Spirit. In the morning, the village council sent messengers saying, "Release these men." So the headman of the prison told small man, "The council has instructed me to release you. You may go in peace." But small man said, "We are citizens of the people of iron. They have beaten us before the village without a trial and thrown us in prison, and now they would send us away in secret? No. Let them come here and take us out themselves." The messengers went back and reported what they said to the village council, And when they heard that they were citizens of the people of iron, they were afraid. So they came and apologized to them, released them, and asked them to leave the village. So after they left the prison, they went to the home of bitter fruit. There they encouraged the sacred family and then left to continue their journey. This is the word of the Lord.
Buenos días. Infatuated. In love with numbers, percentages, rates of adoption, progress scales. Imprisoned by the spirit of globalizing marketing. Consumer ratings populate the imaginary of many a church and parachurch agency. Add to the mix a good dose of illusions of power and conquest, and you get the perfect evangelistic recipe. 7 simple steps for taking over the world for Christ. How to conquer the world, winning the world for Christ, evangelism, marketing experts, end times promotion, strategies and formulas, statistics and pragmatic plans, all are devised to guarantee success in the evangelistic venture. Today's passage throws this entire paradigm into question. It challenges us to welcome God-gifted interruptions as witnesses of the Spirit's transformative power, not our own. It calls us to conversion. Now, before digging into our topic, 2 matters. First, in true Latin American fashion, I must bring you greetings. Greetings from your sisters and brothers at Casa Adobe, the intentional community of Christ followers to which my husband James and I belong in Costa Rica. In this community composed of several families, including refugees, we're seeking to live the good news, being the church Monday through Sunday, and being good neighbors to our human and non-human neighbors. Greetings also from my other meaningful community, Infimit, the International Fellowship for Mission as Transformation, which you will hear more about tomorrow, and from Western Theological Seminary, where I teach. Second, we cannot ponder the good news in this conference without painfully acknowledging that it is not good news for many, many in our world today. So I invite you to a moment of silent prayer in favor of the people of Palestine and Israel, mourning the loss of life and begging for a cessation to the violence. Lord, have mercy. Now we turn to our passage. They had recently made new friends who had responded positively to their ministry. Paul, Silas, and Dr. Luke were warmly welcomed into the home of a well-off Greek businesswoman, Lydia. Along with the members of her household, had been baptized in the city of Philippi after they had received and accepted the good news of Jesus Christ. I can imagine it was not easy for Paul and his companions to overcome their cultural prejudices regarding the leadership of a woman in the new community of the Way. But they appeared to have made peace with the situation. So accompanying this budding community of Gentile Christ followers seemed to be the logical next step for the itinerant missionaries. Consequently, the plan for that day was to join the women by the river. This would be another opportunity to help deepen the faith of the new believers. But something, or rather someone, whose life contrasted significantly with that of Lydia, interrupted them. These men who serve the one above us all are showing us the way to be set free and made whole. Truly, this was not the first time the oppressed slave woman had shouted this out as she followed Paul and the others around. She had been doing so for days, and it was obvious that she was under the influence of a powerful spirit. Perhaps it was her insistence, the unhelpful public exposure, the knowledge that she was being sorely exploited, or simple frustration at the interruption that moved a troubled Paul to order the spirit. As one who represents Creator sets free, the chosen one, I tell you to come out of this woman. Right away, the spirit left her, says Luke. Far outside Paul's neat plan, God's Spirit intervened, and the girl was freed from at least one of her oppressors. I do wish Luke had told us more about her, but what is clear is that the power of God's liberating good news was displayed in the midst of the unexpected to all whose eyes were not blocked by self-interest or prejudice. The story did not end there, however, with Paul and his friends finally walking on to carry out their plans. The interruption became yet more complicated as the plot thickened. Prodded by the disgruntled exploiters who capitalized on the popular prejudice against outsiders in this prominent Roman colony, the crowd attacked Paul and Silas, who were stripped, beaten, and thrown into prison under extreme measures. Things were most definitely not going as planned. Even less planned was the violent earthquake that shook the prison and loosened everyone's chains. And totally unexpected were the posture and actions of the jailer, who fell trembling before Paul and Silas and begged, "What must I do to be set free and made whole?" He had already been saved from his own sword, but the witness of the disciples awoke a thirst for a deeper, fuller salvation. And they were prompt to share Creator's good story. "Put your trust in Creator sets free, our honored chief," they said to him. "He will make you whole and set you and all your family free to follow him." How long they spoke, we do not know. But again, as in the case of Lydia, the whole household was baptized, and this retired Roman soldier joyfully opened his home to Paul and Silas. Imagine what it must have felt like to them. Just hours before, this very man had roughly clamped down their feet into the prison stocks. And here he was, washing their wounds and offering them food, surrounded by his family in his home. Again, God's liberating good news was displayed in the midst of the unexpected. But this time, it was Paul and Silas who were on the receiving end, as the jailer witnessed through his radical hospitality to the transformative power of the evangel. Imagine that. The messenger learning from the recipient of the message. I, for one, wish Luke had, again, told us more about the life of this jailer after his baptism, and I would have loved to hear the voice of his wife and the rest of the family. However, it's not a stretch to think that the unnamed jailer would have had to reconsider his occupation, or at least the way he carried it out, as he stepped into the plot of a story that subverted imperial power, equalized all relationships, and called people to serve instead of being served. After this, Paul and Silas were finally freed, And the magistrates begged them to leave the city once they realized they were Roman citizens and could denounce them for mistreatment. As soon as they were released, Luke finishes off the story of those accidented 24 hours. They went back to Lydia's house, where they met with their siblings in the faith and encouraged them. As they traveled on from Philippi, they left behind them a highly unlikely community of believers. Among others, a Greek entrepreneur, a bunch of women, a Roman jailer and his family. This faith community became a local embodiment of the good news, a visible evidence of the work of God's border-breaking, community-generating spirit. Amen. I propose to you that the road of life and ministry as people of the way is filled with God-gifted disruptions that require on our part humble receptivity and a release of power, a surrender of our pretentious self-importance. We may not be called to cast out a demon or to free a jailer from suicide, but as participants in Creator's story of good purposes for the entire creation, we all need to be attentive to the opportunities God sends our way, both to serve as channels of God's saving grace, even when this upsets our best laid plans. And at the same time, we need to be open to receiving the good news from unexpected people, in unexpected places, in unexpected ways. God-gifted interruptions. Are we open to them? In my youth, my local church in Buenos Aires, Argentina, went through a planning process for witnessing to neighbors in the middle-class area where our building was located. Everything was set for some appealing conferences on topics that might be of interest to the professional people of the neighborhood. But suddenly, just weeks before the series was to be launched, the church was inundated by scores of young people struggling with drug addictions. What were we to do? How should we respond to this unexpected influx? We cannot have them, some church members declared. They'll be a bad influence on our teenagers, one of which was me. Besides, they'll begin stealing people's purses. In the end, and in spite of resistance, the decision was to welcome the young people. A couple families did leave the church, and some purses did get lost. But dozens of women and men were freed from drug dependency and found new life. And a new, unlikely community was fashioned, woven together by God's life-giving spirit. The church was converted to the fullness of the good news, far beyond its original expectations. God-gifted interruptions. Are we open to them? We might, for example, be heading to our desk to prepare a sermon when we get a call from a person in need of a hearing ear. We might be focusing our attention on our seminary students when a migrant family shows up on campus. We might be about to leave for church when a neighbor knocks on our door. We might be so wrapped up in our own agendas that we become unaware of our personal and communal complicity in systems of oppression and blinded to our need to change course. We might be so engaged in the rituals of religion that we're numb to the cry of the people and the cry of the earth. God-gifted interruptions. Are we open to them? The path of the scholar, researcher, teacher, pastor, leader is thickly paved with obligations and responsibilities, academic, pastoral, familial. And we can get so absorbed in our work that we grow calloused to the reality of people around us and deaf to the stirring of God's Spirit, who may be calling us off our expected course or seeking to convert us. God-gifted interruptions. Are we open to them? Do we believe enough in the power of the gospel that we are ready to serve as witnesses in word and deed of the wondrous and liberating acts of God, even when this might draw us away from our neatly pre-established agendas? Are we ready for God's Spirit to free us from our consumer mentality that denigrates people into numbers in our success story of triumphant evangelism, and instead shape us into humble yet prophetic witnesses of God's outrageously inclusive love? Are we sufficiently aware of our own constant need for personal and communal course correction and conversion? Luke's retelling of those 24 hours in the life of Paul and Silas is recorded in Acts as a steady reminder of the life-giving power of the gospel, transformative power that rather than suppressing life, nourishes shalom life, power to deliver from evil forces, power to transform social relations and bring justice, power to transcend limitations of all sorts, power to free from death, power to restore relationships and generate new communities out of people as unlikely as the Greek businesswoman and a Roman jailer who are counted among the founders of the church in Philippi. It is the transforming power of the God who is community. It is my prayer that as we continue living into God's story, we might remain open to the promptings of God's Spirit so that we may welcome God-gifted interruptions that come our way. May we release our infatuation with strategies, numbers, and control, and instead surrender to the Spirit with humility, proclaiming, demonstrating, celebrating, and being radically transformed by the power of the good news. Amen.